Hey everyone, and welcome to our Opus 15 Hits and Misses wrap-up. I'm, of course, Travis Pfeiffer, and I'm lucky, as always, to be joined by your man, 2018 World Champion, Alex Hancox. Alex, how are you, sir?
Doing great, Travis. Great to be here as always. How you been doing?
Excellent. I'm doing all right, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on a lot of this. And so correct me if I'm wrong, kind of just give me a general thought of what you did for Opus 15, because I know when it started, you got really excited when the bands got announced, and at first I didn't think you were going to write anything, and then you started doing your reviews, and you did a few of your weeklies. I know you kind of fell off after that, so kind of just give me your overall thoughts, impressions, how much were you even able to participate, etc.
Like most of the sets that came out during the COVID period, I did a fair bit of content for and then dropped off because there's just, eventually there stops being things to write about because things just kind of get to a standstill at some point. I was very excited. I was playing a lot of Octagon at the start of it, and then we started doing locals again. The show in I think it was February time or late Jan, and you did a few of those, working a lot of them. So just kind of seeing what was going around, what everyone was playing. But it was, the same kind of general vibe. There was Avalanche, there was Sky Pirates, there was Monks, there was a little bit of everything. Everyone's kind of got their own style and flavor they like. So it was always a varied group.
Well, that sounds like you got to see a lot of variety. Did you have a personal favorite deck that you liked playing in Opus 15?
Question really. Like the one I played most is Sky Pirates because I got an affinity with Final Fantasy 12 more than anything. It was just a very strong deck, very clear kind of set game plan. But I think probably the decks I enjoyed the most are the ones that use like water with the new crystal stuff.
Yeah.
So anything using like Mog 6 and the new Lena, Gal, anything like that. Like they weren't super strong, but they felt like they could do a lot of fun things, and every kind of game was slightly different. So I'm hoping they get some more support next set to make me revisit the archetypes.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's jump right into some of the cards we wanted to talk about. So first thing I'll show up here on screen is Guy, and really I'll just talk about the Rebel package in general with Guy, Maria, Leon, Furion, and all that. I think Guy was probably one of the best ones, being able to search out one of the Rebels straight from your deck, put it onto the field. The big power play was if you were on damage 3, pull out Guy, who pulled out Leon. Leon revived Maria from the break zone. Like they were a neat little package. I think they definitely suffered from, one, there's only like 4 of them. 2, Furion is completely reliant on crystals to do anything, which I thought was kind of strange, whereas none of the others were. And then 3, if I had to pick, is that it is like, as much as I part of me always has a special spot in my heart for like big stompy boys, which is basically what they were just big, really powerful things, and they would draw, but beyond that they lacked the interaction that things like Monks or Sky Pirates or arguably even Samurais has. They were just big old bodies, so if they ever wanted to see Rebels succeed, I think they would need to give them some form of like interactivity. Did you get to use them at all?
I didn't, because I didn't really want to. Like it's one of those ones. It's the archetype of the set that got it's like the FF2 and almost like FF9. They get like this very mild support that they kind of work together and they kind of work on their own, but they don't really meet the competitive standard, even sometimes the casual standard of what's playable and what's good. Like you say, they are just big stat. Which one is it? Is it Leon that brings back on like damage 3 or something?
On damage 3 he pulls out Maria.
Yeah, you have to specifically be on damage 3 for half your deck to work, basically. And it's also you're playing 2 colors that aren't good already, and then you're shoehorning a weak archetype into those 2 colors. It's kind of a recipe for disaster there.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, let's move on. Next one, I almost wasn't even going to mention, but I was surprised. So we have Cyan and Samurais. And Samurais, was really popular in Opus 12. Kind of fell off a little bit in Opus 13 and seemed to really fall off in Opus 14. But it definitely had a resurgence. And part of me is like, the Cyan is obviously good, and it's nice that the crystal generator backup they got happened to be card named Samurai. But was that really what brought them back, or do you think maybe it had more to do with like the bans of like, well, they didn't have to deal with Stern anymore, or how do you? I don't know. I guess part of me is kind of surprised that like, one, that they dipped out and then came back, because this card, while good, it still does what they always did, right? It just kind of removes stuff off the board. So I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way. How do you see Samurais?
Yeah, I mean, it was less the Cyan and more the standard unit Samurai that came out last set, because the problem was, like, Samurai, it was obviously good, still reasonably decent in Opus 13, and then you had the Samurai come out, I think, in Opus 14, right? And then we had the Cyan that's come out in 15, but then we had 14 with Stern, and Fire or Mono Fire couldn't utilize Stern at all, and they just kind of lost to Stern decks, because obviously it's all about damage. Stern just buffs your board by 4k, so all the removal options are weak. Tenzin being a 9k Brave is irrelevant because you just go over the top of him.
Yeah.
So they never got really a chance to use that Samurai, so they benefited both from Stern's ban and this new late game tool they had with the 3CP Samurai. Cyan is also another nice late game tool. Obviously you get the 3 drop out early game to search Tenzin and backups, and then the idea is you have the 7 drop later in the game when you're on 5 damage, or just later in the game when you need to start just one-shotting stuff. And yeah, it's just very solid. It has Amaterasu, and Amaterasu is better than ever, so it's the deck that kind of best utilizes it, because it puts damage pressure on while having this this card that stops the majority of ball clears.
Nice. Good insight there. All right, next we have Bahamut. I had to mention this just because I was kind of underwhelmed by this card when I first saw it, just because, you know, it's just like, okay, it's a fire summon. It deals damage to something. But I didn't appreciate, and I think it was maybe your review that kind of turned me on to trying it, like how nice it was to be able to deal 9,000 damage for 4 CP. Because we have an Ifrit that does 9,000 for 5, and it has an EX burst, but that 5 always felt so expensive. So being able to do 2 cards from hand with this, or if you have that crystal, which again, if you got that Samurai backup, so now you pitch a single card, Bahamut can just nuke something for 9, and 9 is kind of like the new standard big body type that, you know, you really have to deal with. So I really ended up appreciating Bahamut way more than I anticipated doing so.
Yeah, like the big thing is that the 2 arguably like best, like, I guess, non-fire cards in the format are, at least the big ones, are Bismarck and Leviathan, right? And they both, like, Leviathan has an entry ability, but it's not exactly, you know, it's a 2-part entry ability. If you stop it midway, it only gets half of it. So if you're paying 5 for Bismarck or 9 for Leviathan, and they're already spending 4, or even 2 with a crystal to break it and remove the big sort of continuous threat off the board, then it's a really great rate for them. And Fire just didn't have that at all. You know, I think if that Bahamut hadn't been released, we might have been seeing Samurai decks playing that 5 CP for it, just to have an option, because, you know, if Bismarck gets answered by 2 cards, just generally doesn't feel so bad. It feels like you've got an even or better trade for the win player. If it gets answered by 1 card that was more cost efficient, especially on the turn Bismarck's played, then you suddenly start to feel like you're going to be behind quite quickly if you're not already.
Great insight. I always love to hear those little comparisons and why, you know, cards can feel as strong as they do. We'll get to something else like that. First, we'll got to touch on Palum, and we might as well talk about Palum as well. We'll just talk about the twins as a whole. It's so funny because I remember when this Palum first got revealed, I think everyone felt kind of underwhelmed, like, oh, that just doesn't seem very good. And then Palum came out, and we're like, oh, wow. And, you know, I'm not an aggro player, so I always forget to review cards based on an aggro setting. And I never thought of, what if you just jam out Palum and Palum turn 1 and say deal with this, or, you know, even Rydia, and so you go Rydia, Palum, Palum turn 1, and seeing what it could do was pretty disgusting, and having to play against it too. There were some matchups it was like, oh, I guess I just lose, because any forward I put out, they'll go, okay, for no cost, I'm just going to completely blank them and remove them, you know, kill them with these guys. Like, I definitely underestimated this card, and seeing the twins in action, again, part of me is just like, God, these things are obnoxious. Like, for no cost. For free, your turn, my turn, I'm just going to completely take your board over. So tell me about the twins.
Yeah, the nice thing they've done with Final Fantasy IV as a whole category is that there are a lot of individually very good cards, but they're very deliberately spread out across the elements. Mm-hmm. Like you say, we got Rydia, Palum, Palum as like a deck, but the reason that deck isn't just like the best deck is because it's 3 color. You know, you normally play water, earth with a splash of fire, and sometimes that splash of fire can really hurt consistency. And if you were to take it to a tournament, you could easily lose your best of 1 in Swiss just to bricking. So I think that might have put some people off playing it. But yeah, it also has those other side of it where you massively high roll, you open like Rydia Porum, and then next turn you put the Palum down because you've drawn a fire card, and you have Amaterasu or Mist Dragon to stop something they're going to do to remove you, and then all of a sudden your opponent just can't play any 5 CP or lower forward because it just dies for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, a very scary archetype. I mean, even just Rydia and Porum has been strong. I haven't really seen Rydia and Palum do too much work, but yeah, Fire Water, it's nice because it's already a decent archetype. It's always kind of been there, but you can just kind of shove these two twins in. It doesn't really take up much deck space. It gives you something you want extra, like the way Terra Ping makes Amaterasu do 10k, stuff like that. The same thing goes for Palum. So they're really neat, and they're probably going to be around for a long time. And there's going to be all sorts of decks that try and utilize them, I think.
Absolutely. There was a Cure Series match I cast where they were on the field so long, I think they both had like 12,000 power. And I remember saying, like, this guy's got Sasano in hand, but it doesn't matter. Like, he can't even kill him with the Sasano. He's just going to sit there. So, yeah, twins definitely showed up. So this next card, I definitely have like a special feeling towards with you, because in our Opus 14 hits and misses that we did, you mentioned that, well, you know, Fire doesn't really have any cards that like feel good to cast, you know, and like the day after this Brynhildr card got spoiled. So here's this Brynhildr card that basically did exactly what you wanted to do, is that not only does it kill something, it draws you a card back, so it matches the value of like the Earth Water Ceremobius cards, or you know, these Palumporum cards, the Sky Pirate cards, whatever, in that, hey, not only are you getting rid of that forward, you're getting a card back off of it. So really neat card. Had a buddy who tried it out with the new Lulu from the starter set, which feels really cool, because it's just like, as long as Lulu's on the field, Brynhildr will kill anything and draw you a card. So yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, like I think I said it in the review, but if I didn't anyway, it's basically the perfect card, like in terms of design. You know, it's small damage, but if the forward dies, you get to draw, so it has a good reward to it, and it's just like, it's kind of something every element needs. And part of the big reason, like, you know, Ice struggles a lot is because you know, like we're talking about just Palum and Porum just now. You put down Palum and Porum versus Ice. You know, unless they could actually just sit there active forever, and they would never die, right? But against Fire, you know, you put that down, you have they only have a short window. But if they Brynhildr your Palum or Porum before the end phase hits, or they've only got one counter on them, all of a sudden you're going to start feeling bad. You're going to be scrambling to get them back, draw another copy. And yeah, I wish every element got a similar kind of card, like Wind got the Garchi Machera, but also like, bounces 2-drops and draw the card. It's not as good. Like Brynhildr is definitely the top tier of these kind of more removal bits. But yeah, I love Brynhildr as a card. I do think it's really important that with the amount of strong 2CP 5Ks they've released since like Kral and Opus 12, how necessary it is to have easy answers to remove them.
Yeah, that's a great point, and kind of touching on that point in general, I agree, is that I don't mind strong cards being printed. I think they're good and they're fun to use, but like you said, I just want to see everything get it. Like, I played an ice match against the Twins, and you were right, they just sat there like, all right, well, I'm never going to dull myself, because I know you can't even hit me unless I'm dull. So yeah, I hope other elements get something like a Brynhildr. All right, speaking of ice, coolest ice card printed in a long time, even though I'm pretty sure I'm the only person who used it. But I like this guy a lot. This is Where I. He was our backup. It was really fun and enjoyable to open Where I, put down Edward next turn, they discard, you start drawing. And there was something, at least to me, because it's not that, you know, a lot of stuff draws you a card, right? But drawing, when they're discarding, you can see, you know, your CP resources are going in opposite directions. So not only did you just go +2, they went -2. So whoop, you're just widening that gap. I do agree he was probably a little expensive. I think he could have been a 3 cost. And I do wish he activated on your opponent's turn, specifically because there isn't much that even discards on your opponent's turn as is. And again, I think I might be the only guy who liked this card because I never saw anyone else touch it. Maybe it's just because people don't like ice in general, but I really appreciated it. It was a fun way to bring discard back without just over punishing your opponent. Like, here's this forward that drops 4 cards from your hand on entry. So I loved Where I. Did you even get to try it?
I didn't, but I mean, I saw a lot of Octagon games where people were using it. One of my locals played a lot of Mono Ice this set and used it a lot. Like, it is a good card, yeah, but it's also it's still, like you say, it's quite fair at 4 CP and only being during your turn. They're always very cautious with anything to do with discard. I think maybe that's correct because obviously, discard led to basically the first bans. But yeah, it's not like you drawing cards. It's more the fact that you drawing cards as an ice player doesn't mean a whole lot because most of your cards aren't very good.
Right.
So it's more about the CP resource and the actual cards you're looking to draw, I feel like, half the time, which makes Where I seem very fair. But yeah, the biggest problem that I saw, playing against it and seeing it was, like it's just very vulnerable to Leviathan. And like that's something, again, like, 4 CP static backups like that can't really get around. But yeah, like as much as you could recoup the value or recoup the cost over 2 turns with 2 discards, when a Leviathan then came down, you still want to use the Where I every turn, but you never want to pay the 4 CP to recast it. So it was just a bit awkward that Leviathan exists, and obviously if Sophie hadn't been limited, stuff like that, I think Fenrir would have been more popular and made it even more difficult. So yeah, it's a nice card. It's just, like you say, a bit too expensive.
Yeah, definitely required an investment. So something that really took me by surprise was this new Orphan. I remember when I first read it. I don't know if I even really took in what the text said, but I was like, I don't know, it just seems fine. And trying him in practice, like, wow, this card did way more than I thought it did. Perfect Where I companion. And I think there was just something... So again, a lot of these new effects we've gotten with these action abilities on the twins, on a lot of the Sky Pirates, they don't cost anything. It's free resource. So I think it really made a difference that you had this card that said for no cost, for simply going through your turn, you're going to dump something out of their hand, and then you can knock a forward out of the way as well. I didn't really appreciate that value until, again, I got into a match and realized, so as long as he exists, I'm going to keep getting value off of it. And then again, if you've got the Where I, you can draw more. So I think... if Ice wants to compete with some of these other elements, it's going to need more stuff like that you don't actually have to pay into something every time. It's like, as long as it's there, it's going to keep getting you value. How'd you feel about Orphan?
Yeah, I was thinking just now, like the card I think I feel like I compare it to most is like a fair version of Neo X-Death in a way. Like obviously it only hits the hand, Neo X-Death hits the board, all these other things, but it's like, it's one of those things, if Orphan was a 4 CP, even a 4 CP 7k, it would be like substantially better because you just be comfortably playing it on turn 1, with Where I, without Where I, with whatever, and they'd be on a clock immediately. But now you feel like if you play it for 6 CP on turn 1, your opponent they don't mind discarding because you're playing a black belt at that point until the next turn. So it being 5 is makes it kind of perfectly balanced. Like it's good, but it's not overpowered because you can play it with 1 backup, sure, but there's just a good chance these days that it will be Typhoned away, Alexander, Ifrited, Bahamut. There's a lot of removal that hits Orphan quite conveniently, so it doesn't feel oppressive, but it does feel like a very necessary card for Ice to get, and I was surprised it was a rare rather than a hero.
Yeah, right? Alright, after Orphan we've got Gogo, arguably the most interesting card in the set. I wish I had gotten more time to experiment with Gogo decks. I didn't, but I did really enjoy the ones I got to see. I know Uni Young Team, Steve D came up with some fun ones that was like Ice, Lightning, Earth mix, and it was just... because of the way the effect was designed, it was really neat, and I love cards like this. It encouraged a lot of different deck builds and people to try, okay, what action abilities can exist? Which ones can I jam in there? Which ones really abuse Gogo? Because some of them actually would hurt Gogo. They'd like make him weaker depending on what they were. But some of them are like, oh, Gilgamesh has to break himself, but Gogo doesn't have to break himself. He just gets to break another forward. So really cool card. I wish I'd gotten more time to play with it. I want to experiment more with it in the future. In theory, you'd think it could only get stronger because surely they're just going to keep printing a lot of action abilities. And thank God Stern wasn't around with this guy because I'd hate to see a Stern Gogo effect. What'd you feel about our Ice Mimic?
Yeah, it was really nice, especially early days on Octagon. I saw a lot of people experimenting with Gogo, and it felt like Final Fantasy from like 3 years ago almost. Like I saw some like Gogo mirror matches, and they all about going to 5 backups and then trying to just get the most incremental value out of Gogo, stick it at the perfect time so it doesn't die straight away, so they get a good sort of value on it, and it just felt like. I guess the reason I don't like it so much because after I saw those decks, it was like, that looks lots of fun to play, but it's also very fair. It looks like the fun Final Fantasy of 3 years ago, but it also plays like Final Fantasy 3 years ago in 2022 kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool card, and I do think there's a chance there are going to be cards that come out that make it top tier in the future. Just right now, most of them are Lightning, and as much as Ice Lightning is nice with Alcid and Zeromus and all these other kind of things, it's not quite the 50 cards aren't quite there yet to be up to scratch with the rest of the meta, but it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, fun over being strong, that's for sure. All right. I'm showing the Ice Knight backup, but in general, I'm just going to use this moment to kind of talk about crystals, and particularly the crystal backup generators. Obviously, all these backup generators were basically essential for crystal generation in Opus 15. It did strike me as kind of weird that almost all of their abilities, if not all of them, I think, are restricted to your turn. Reading all the abilities, I don't think any of them are that strong that it would have been too powerful to use them on your opponent's turn. But yeah, if you wanted to use crystals, this was kind of your way to do it. And we'll talk about a few more crystal cards later, like the Lena. But in general, I don't know. I think at the end of it, I kind of just feel the same way about crystals. Like, they hit basically where I expected them to, in that if you got these early, turn 1, you're putting these down, now you've got your crystals, now you can play your Robel or whatever else immediately. Whereas other times, if I didn't see them early and I have these cards in hand that want to use crystals and I have no crystals to use them, then that didn't feel very good. So ultimately, I think they kind of landed where I thought they would.
Yeah, the crystal backups in particular, they had a lot of chances to shake things up a bit with it. Like particularly how they did the fire one being a samurai, being searchable by Cyan. So you had a deck that was already quite strong, and then it had basically it had free crystals. You had no deck investment because you were always going to play the samurai backup anyway. So it effectively meant Bahamut in that deck was going to be a 2CP 9k most of the time, because a lot of the time you'd have that samurai. Whereas something like Earth got a
the Geomancer, I think.
The Geomancer instead of a monk. So if they decided to call it a monk, do I think monks would have then therefore been considered top tier? I actually think that could have been the thing that would have made monks continue, with Sophie being limited, to still be very strong, because they would have access to Robel and 1 CP of the new tie and stuff like that. It doesn't already have that, but it just, that extra bit of synergy is all it takes for a deck to be over the top. So I think as far as the action abilities go, like the Ice one in particular has a really, really good action ability. I can understand why it's limited to your turn. It feels like they were like, okay, I'm going to do 2 CPs that generate a crystal, but that's just too boring if that's all it says. They just gave it a generic effect related to that element and thought, here you go. It's just, unfortunately, stuff like the Earth one kind of suck, and the Ice one's kind of really good, but which helps because Ice was not very good and Earth was. Right. So as far as the meta goes nowadays, a lot of it made sense.
That's a great point to think of. If they had just changed the name, made the Geomancer a monk, if this knight had become, I don't know what Ice has, but something like that. Yeah, because like you said, the samurai was great just because, well, it's a samurai, so, Tenzin and Cyan can pull it off. Great point. So our Ice Lightning legend, named Lightning, of course. So I'm going to talk about the good things about this card first, is that it could be very cheap. If you were playing a discard deck, you got their hand down, playing it for 1 felt really good. And there were several games, I can count them all on my hand, that I was able to steal a victory, because I remember one, my opponent had 10 forwards on board. They were playing Warriors of Light. They'd put out basically everything in existence. And it was like, well, there's no way I'll ever get through that board, but he was on 6 damage. So I just put out Lightning, took the last card out of his hand with Orphan or some other effect, went to my end phase, just ditched everything in my hand. Boop, Lightning just kills you. Beyond that, though, I like the idea of this card. I still think it's very clunky, and I really think it should have just been a payoff as if you get their hand empty. And I do understand why they probably didn't do that. They probably thought it would be too oppressive that, well, not only can they not play anything from their hand, you're dealing them extra damage every turn, but it just, I never want to dump my own hand. And you have to do that too to give her own haste effect. I don't understand why that wasn't based on your opponent's hand. So I really like the idea of this card, but playing with it, I just wish it didn't feel so clunky. And again, maybe it's not fair because people always say, well, Sophie was broken, Sophie got limited for a reason. But I did see Sophie, and Sophie was so easy and so smooth. And so I'm like, oh, is this what it looks like if you don't do that? Oh, that's not as fun. What do you think of Lightning?
Lightning brings up a good kind of argument about the way they go about balancing cards, because I agree, Lightning could have had could have just been your opponent's empty hand, could have had something else to make it a little bit better. You know, you could just write it off as, oh, it's an ice card, so it's not going to be as good as other elements. But they very specifically try to future-proof a lot of cards, which a lot of other card games don't necessarily do when they bring out powerful new cards to try and, you know, get people excited about an archetype or, you know, in this case, an element. So I actually think if Final Fantasy kind of employed a limited list or a banned list more often, they could make Lightning, you know, good now. And if something then comes along in the future that breaks it, then there could be an argument that then you limit it or you do something different to it. You know, if it was an online game, you could errata it, no trouble. But Final Fantasy is very limited in the fact that it has very, very balanced cards for the most part. So yeah, this Lightning is kind of probably going to stay just about above average for forever. It's always going to be there. It's always going to exist as this unique effect, but it's never going to quite reach the upper echelons of cards like Sophie, unfortunately.
Yeah, great insight. Well, that we'll warm up after some icy veins, and we'll go to wind. And of course, we got to talk about Sky Pirates. I'll mention Philo first and Kites. And Philo is just like, Philo is what every tribal wants. And I just can't get Matisky's words out of my head where he said they made it so clean. Like, so not only is this a 2CP Sky Pirate backup, it doesn't really name clash. There was only, I think, one other Philo card, and no one really used that. So great name in the right element. And then not only does it color fix itself, it color fixes your other Sky Pirate backup. So if you're playing the Fran, which most people did, you're playing the Tomage, now they all can generate. And then on top of that, it's got actually a pretty decent special that I didn't see used a whole lot, but could catch people off guard. Like, yeah, every time I see Philo, I'm just like, man, can cadets get something like that? Can knights get something like that? Can some of these other ones that are just spread amongst so much? Like, Philo is, and it's with a lot of the Sky Pirate stuff in general, and we'll talk about this Kites and Pinello later too, is that all of it can be not only pulled out of the deck by Vaughn, but then revived off of the Balthier as well. Like, just man, they just, yeah, clean. They made it as clean as they possibly could.
Yeah, it's like what I was saying with the Lightning just now about it being like balanced, because they didn't want to push it too hard. Like they pushed Sky Pirates too hard this set, and it, you know, made it. I mean, I'm not going to say it made it too good, but it's like like you said about it being too clean. Like it's too easy. It doesn't actually require, you know, the deck building, the deck construction goes out the window. It's very, very simple. There's every Sky Pirate deck has maybe like 5 flex slots in it. Not a lot of other archetypes have such an easy time. Playing it is obviously very different. You still have to be able to play it well, and it does take a long time because it is a wind water deck, so it's going to be backup focused rather than aggro. But yeah, like Philo is exactly what we needed, a Sky Pirate with a different name on a backup other than Fran and whoever else. But yeah, it's just a bit too easy, and it's like, you know, the next set, the set after that, there'll be another archetype that gets it a bit too easy, and it's going to keep happening. But it does say a lot that even though Sky Pirate is, in my opinion, the best deck, that a lot of other decks in the format can compete with it. It's just eventually it gets to that point where it can't lose.
Yeah, no, you said it perfectly. And speaking of Sky Pirates, speaking of too easy, Kites, man, I don't know if I underrated this card or I was just secretly hoping it wouldn't be as strong as it was, but this card is just, I think this card is pretty busted. In particular, there's just not a lot in the game to stop action abilities. Like, okay, you can use Jex Special or you can use Opus 6 Leviathan, but that's basically it. So this card is basically unkillable, unless they were foolish enough, I guess, to put it out by itself for some reason. But, you know, you can throw 5 different forms of removal at this card. They'll always respond by breaking it and bouncing one of their other guys. And in particular, I wonder if they purposely made it Amaterasu proof, because again, when that Vaughn comes back in at the end, during the end phase, you can't respond to it. So even if you have Amaterasu in hand, you're not allowed to do it. So thank God he removed himself from the game, because could you imagine if this just went to the break zone and then you could recur it with Balthier? Like, I'd probably just quit the game at that point. Like, all right, you win. I can't even begin to touch you. But yeah, this card was very obnoxious to deal with.
Yeah, it's a new effect, which was kind of cool. So it shook up things in the fact that, you know, you couldn't just use single target removal anymore and just have an easy time of it. You really had to think about how you're going to combat the kites Vaughn board. You know, if they have an Althea down, it makes it even more irritating because you go and target it, and even if the kites doesn't work for whatever reason, then the Althea will bounce the Varn back or whatever else back to the hand. So it kind of creates this puzzle, which would be fun to solve if the solutions actually existed. But outside of lightning and Porum, I guess, in water, there really aren't that many good solutions to kites, and that's why Sky Pirate is so strong. I do wonder how it would fare if we had just seen stuff like Philo and no kites, or just something a little worse than kites, because kites even lets you flicker backups, and I've done that. Yeah. I've done that on my Fran enough times to think, yeah, this didn't need to happen, but yeah, golly, it's good.
To say the least. Okay, moving away from Sky Pirates for a second. Kane, a card that was, I don't know, I think several people were like, is this the Legend? This feels more like a hero card, but I guess they were trying to make all the Amano art Legend. This guy was, I don't know, I kind of went back and forth on him. Like, it's undeniable how strong his effects are, and it's on attacks, you can repeat it, but man, I don't know if it was just because people had no, like, I just felt like I never got to actually use him that much. I'd put him down, turn one, I'd go like, Dragoon back up, the Kane, so he's got a crystal, he's not going to leave my side, and they would just instantly respond with Bahamut or just something, and so I never even got to use his effect that much. Maybe that's because he's got a target on his back, because people know what happens if he does start resolving, but I don't know, like, he's a neat little card, but I can't lie, I felt a little underwhelmed by him.
Yeah, Kane, the reason I think you feel underwhelmed is because he's hasn't got any good matchups. Like, if you think of Kane as like a deck, Kane of turn one crystal back up, Kane, go. Okay, I'll play Tenzen. Now what do you do?
Yeah.
I'll play Porum. Now what do you do? Sky Pirate is the only one it really can get a few attacks off. But even then, Sky Pirate doesn't mind you drawing a few cards, because if they're setting up backups and not dying too fast, they know they're going to win 5 turns from now anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those cards that if the meta was different, if the top decks weren't what they were, it could be a case of, oh, how do we beat turn one Kane? We'd be thinking about that a lot more, but the answers already exist, and they're already in the decks we're playing. We're not playing them for Kane. Yeah. We're playing them because they're good. So it's as simple as that.
Great point. I love your insight, Alex. All right, rounding out Win, we've got Bart, a card I really didn't think much of, just because even with him being the pre-release kind of promo guy. But having seen a goofy Warriors of Light deck, and I love Warriors of Light, and it's so many colors, but like me and my buddy built one, and it's, there's fire and water and wind. And to see these like chains that can go off where, okay, Bart is on the field. Here comes Lena. She makes a crystal. She's going to spend a crystal. Bring in a Warrior of Light. That gives Bart's makes another crystal, and then this one comes in, and then Lena spends the other. Like, it's kind of goofy, the amount of like chains that can go off. Also, I think it was really easy to overlook, like, him just holding a crystal means he's got 10,000 power. And then when he dies, if you have all these crystals, he can revive himself. He can revive one of the other Warriors of Light. So, again, it was probably like Gogo, more fun than really practical, but it was pretty fun when you got into it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really played with them. Seemed like far too hard work. It's one of those things, like you're saying with cadets earlier. If Warrior of Light had a Philo, they've got Cosmos, but that's kind of not a great example. If they had a searchable kind of Cosmos kind of thing, and it easier to search one, then you could see Bart being a bit more useful. But it's just in the wrong color, and it doesn't seem like he has a particularly good reason for being in the wrong color apart from being associated with the Wind Crystal in Final Fantasy V.
Yeah, great point. I think that wraps up our Wind. Yeah, let's move on to Earth. Hekaton Kyre. So this was a card that I really wasn't high on when I first saw it, and I played with it, and then my opinion kind of went up a little bit, and I played with it some more, and then it kind of went down a little bit. Like, it seemed to fit really well in the mill deck that had like Porums and the Mindflayers and things like that, just because that wanted Earth summons. But I don't know. Again, sometimes I would even have it in hand, and my opponent would have just had this board of 9Ks, so it couldn't even get them. So I think in the end, I don't know, and I never even saw it a whole lot. So I think my opinion's kind of low on Hekaton Kyre. Did you get to see it anymore? How do you feel?
I really liked it. I still really do like it. I mean, it's another fair and balanced card. Similarly to Brunhilde, it's like good, but it's not too good. And yeah, the main thing is like it can't do 9K because you can't have a 5 CP card with no cost do do 9k. That's just way too good. Being able to just play a complete board clear or 5 backups for 1 card it goes beyond what the stage we're at in Final Fantasy right now. At least with Titan, he costs 7 and all he leaves behind is a 9k, which is nice, but then you got Shantoto, which you can't do off 5 backups, etc, etc. Even Fiend Valor capped out at 8k, and you required 2 different cards and a specific setup. So the fact that Hex Puncher does 8,000 for 1 card and isn't as hyped up as it maybe seems like it should be, does go to show how much the game has developed since the days of Fiend Valor 4. But I still think it's really good, and we'll see it again in the future. I don't even really know why they bothered with the only on your turn clause, because usually I cast it on my turn anyway, so it's just solid.
Yeah, great. I like that insight. Interesting. I hadn't considered that. Yeah, wow, what if this did do 9k and then you could just tap 5 and boom, clear the board? That would feel awful. So great point on that. Next, in Earth, we have Lady Rydia. Man, this card was definitely great, and part of me is, I guess, pretty glad that the kind of Doga Sophie deck died out, because Doga got banned, and I can only imagine how strong Rydia would have been in that deck with all its summons. Again, seen decks with the twins, yeah, you got to go into 3 colors, but when Rydia gets those counters, just watching people just Amaterasu from their hand completely for free, Alexander for free, or whatever other. Oh, I've seen Rydia's get huge 6 counters, 8 counters. Yep, Remora for free, just like good gravy. And like her whole protection thing, it's almost, I feel like they're in this weird spot where they don't want these cards to just all die to Amaterasu, or they don't want this to just get Brynhildred and then it's done. So on one hand, I'm grateful for the fact that she can't take that damage. On the other hand, it also makes them like unnecessarily annoying to get rid of. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know, because I think if you had taken away that protection, would she have been too weak? Would she still be strong? Like I don't know. The card was great though. I saw it do, to quote Ollivander from Harry Potter, saw it do many wonderful or terrible things. Great, but terrible. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was a big debate on like, why does it not consume the counters? Why does it have this inbuilt immunity? Why is it so pushed? And then you start playing the format, you start playing the game again, and you understand why. It's actually pretty balanced as it is. In the archetype, you see it played in like Palum, Porum, monks, Earth decks in general. Not many other cards have that inbuilt protection, so it's nice to have it double down on that. So you've got one card that fills a lot of kind of gaps, and it's really a fun card, to be honest. Like without Rydia, we wouldn't have seen cards like Opus 3 Phoenix come back. Mist Dragon got a whole lot better with it, because it's always been a bit annoying having to pay 3 for Mist Dragon. Playing 0 for it is pretty cool, because it's always a reactive summon, so it's not anything like oppressive. I feel like the one thing that's annoying, which is just an Amaterasu problem in general, is it can cast Amaterasu for free. Yeah. Even with the bans, you can still just go Rydia Porum turn 1 with an Amaterasu in hand, and there's just a very specific set of draws your opponent has to have to be able to beat that without feeling like they're going to have to pull their hair out to do so.
A thing with the counters too, I'm glad you brought up that point, because that was a huge debate when this card first came out, was like, why doesn't it consume the counters? And having played it, I almost wish there was a middle ground, because I think if it did use the counters, I actually think it would be too weak then, because you'd basically get off one summon and then it'd take you forever to rebuild those counters back up. And yet at the same time, the fact that it just stacks them infinitely also feels kind of bad. So I don't know. Maybe it was just this was the lesser of two evils. I don't know if there was some middle ground they could have found on that. But I do agree, like, if it did consume the counters, I actually think that would have been too weak then.
Yeah. I wonder if they'd made it so it gave itself 3 counters and then removed the counters. Would that have been better? Would that have been too good? It plays itself, so you've got a free Amaterasu cast in hand at all times. And if you play another one or another FF4, then you can play Remora for free once. But then is it then going to be easier to boost it up to 12 counters and then cast a Remora and 2 Amaterasus free? You never know what dangerous ground you could be covering there. Yeah,
that's a good point. So moving on in Earth, we're going to talk about my favorite card from this set, Robel Ackbell. Black Mage. I haven't played much of 11, so I don't even know who this character is, but this is... I'm going to gush about this card for a second because I love it. I think this is like a perfectly designed card. And what I say that is because I think it's unequivocally good but it's still situational, and I like that. I'm not a huge fan of, if anyone's watching my channels, it's one of the reasons I complained about Kadaj a lot back in, Opus 11 or Opus 3 Zidane, is because there's never a bad time to play those cards. Those cards are just great anytime you play them. And I like that in Robel, he's not necessarily always great. If you don't have a crystal, he's not going to get that entry value, but he's also not useless. You can still play him without the crystal, and then, okay, but if you don't deal with him, I'm going to start getting that extra draw every turn. But even that draw is a little situational because you got to have a backup in your break zone. So I personally very much enjoy that card design, that you're not just going to, you could turn one, slam out Robel, and then bank on the other value, but then you're losing that initial value. So I just really like the way he's designed, and he encouraged really creative deck spaces where people would build these decks. I built Ice Earth with around the Edward backup special, as well as Katone. I built Wind Earth using the Aerith Planet Protector, abusing that over and over again. Built Lightning with the X-Death backup. He was just a neat card that encouraged a lot of different play, but again, he wasn't so ridiculous that I never thought, when my opponent played Robel, I was never like, oh my god, I don't even want to play anymore, game's over. I was like, oh, okay, how am I going to answer this? I love this card.
Yeah, like you say, it's nice because it's very balanced. I think more cards need to be designed with that in mind, that if you want a card to have a really good effect, then you have to earn it. And some cards don't really have to earn it. So the fact that Robel does is really good, because, with a crystal, he's a black mage. With no crystal, he's a black belt. It's as simple as that. So
it's a great comparison. I love that. All right. I think that's what we've got in Earth. Yeah, moving on to Lightning. I'm showing Nyx on screen, but I'm going to just talk about the Kingsglaive in general. I was a little disappointed with them when I first saw them, because my whole thing was, I could tell they had, Nyx and Regis had these protection effects, but my big concern was but they don't really present a threat. So what's really the why do you even want to get rid of them? Because they're not threatening to remove forwards when they attack or anything. And then at the end of the set, I have to admit, I kind of still felt the same way. There was some fun to be had with them. And in particular, I think Regis's ability that he completely cancels the effect was actually quite good, because it meant if they targeted you with things like Leviathan or Blaze, Regis didn't just protect himself, he canceled the entire effect, so he protected everything. I really liked that. I liked that Regis made them all cheap. Getting to play Nyx for one because Regis and Glauco was out felt really good. Nyx, unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of great 15 targets that are 5 or less that you really want to pull out of the deck. We'll get to Arden later, I'm sure. And in particular, I'll just say the same thing I said originally, was that I really wish the other Kingsglaive, they all have these action abilities, but they don't work with the Regis. I wish that if you put them into the break zone for Regis, you cancel the effect, and then you got their ability. Crow's the only one who does that. When you do that with Crow, you'll always get the forward back. But if you put Tread in for Regis's ability, you don't get Tread's effect when he puts himself in. So, I don't know. I was kind of, they basically lived up to where I thought they would be, which is just not much of any place at all.
Yeah, it was a massive letdown, to be honest. Lightning really needed a boost, and it's really dragged down by the fact that this entire, the entire Lightning, half the Lightning cards in the set are dedicated to this archetype, and it falls completely flat. I don't really know what went wrong in the design room there, but it did, and it's a shame.
Yeah, well said. All right, next we have Fel Thanos. Man, another card I was really high on, and then playing him was just weird. And so here's my thing on Fel Thanos. So he's supposed to be your board wipe, right? He's supposed to be your Shantoto, but he's one cheaper. He hits active stuff, so he's lightning. However, in practice, when would you play a board wipe? Most people are going to play a board wipe when they are at most even, but usually when they're behind. Your opponent's got 3 forwards. Now I drop my board wipe. Well, the problem is, because he hits active targets, I would find that my opponent's, let's say, going aggressive against me, but if they're going aggressive, they're attacking me, which means all their forwards are dull. So dropping the Fel Thanos is, meaningless, because they don't even have any active forwards. I wonder if he should have been even cheaper. 6, he's only 1 less than Shantoto. He's the same price as Sasano, and it's just so easy for him to miss. I really liked the idea that they were giving Lightning its own board wipe, but man, this one just totally fell flat for me.
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to think of reasons it might have been better. Maybe if Stern still existed as a card, then he would have been good for like when they're aggressive, going turn 1, playing a bunch of forwards and a stern. But he really doesn't like mean anything as far as the format goes. He's completely useless versus Sky Pirates because he has to stay active. If you've got a Balthier out, you can't cast it. Yeah, it's a bit like the whole lightning active thing is just too much of a deterrent on this card. Like it probably needed to have some kind of condition on it, but that one is a bit too hefty to make it realistic for competitive play.
I'm glad you brought up Balthier and Bismarck too, is that lightning is basically worthless against those cards because, okay, I have to be active, there, I'll just dull everything for no cost. Like, oh, it was miserable if you ever had to play against it. Okay, next we have a card that was quite cool, and this is Lilith, and of course I'll talk about Myakov as well, Dancers. It's really surprising that these two cards alone basically made their own little tribal, but Lilith has some great abilities, and I had some fun with a Dancer deck where it would just go aggro Dancers, turn 1, Myakov into Lilith. Okay, I'll dull any forwards you put out in front of me. Also, you can't choose them by any abilities, which is very prominent, so had a good time with them. It's kind of a shame she was in Lightning. She was probably put in there purposefully because they didn't want to make it super easy with Water Wind. But yeah, this was a fun little archetype to play around with, to dance the night away.
Yeah, we actually had a Dancer deck do very well at the Bahamut Brawl, right? It was I think like the last big event. Snugsy came, I think, second with it, with a Sky Pirate Dancer hybrid deck. That was really cool to see. I mean, I played against like pure Dancers before, which was kind of designed in a similar way to the YRP Gullwing deck, where it just kind of just plays those Dancers, Ishtola and Zidane, and a bunch of summons and EX bursts.
Yeah.
And that was a real pain in the ass because, it did get to a point where if you were playing a deck that couldn't beat that board, you just couldn't beat that board. There was nothing you could do. And it still felt like it felt oppressive when it got into that state, but again, they had to work for it. So it felt like it was deserved. So yeah, a neat little package. And if we happen to get better Dancers that haven't got such kind of niche abilities like the ones we have now, then it could improve in the future.
Yeah, they will definitely benefit if we get more Dancers. All right. Finally, Lady Lilith. I don't have as much to say about this one because, again, it pretty much did what I thought it would do. I felt like it was too expensive and that the card itself was so easy to get rid of. It's a 2-cost. There's a lot of 2-cost hate nowadays. It's only 5K. So I didn't see a whole lot of this, but I don't know. I guess I was just so disappointed by Lightning in general this set because, like you said, half of the cards were Kingsglaive, and then that was a letdown. And then this was one of their legends, but she was tied to crystals, and again, she's just... I still just don't understand why certain cards get restrictions and others don't. Like, why is she limited to you can only do the haste effect once? If they've got a bunch of crystals, let them haste away all their lightning guys. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't know. Did you play her at all, or did you see her?
Yeah, I liked her a lot. I didn't think she was good at first, and I started playing her. I thought she was great. But yeah, she is, again, like, almost too... I don't know if she is too balanced. I think the color's just too balanced. Like if she had come out with some good lightning cards, like some of the ones we're seeing come out of Opus, the next Opus, like Hio and stuff like that, then maybe she would have been a lot better right now. The biggest downside is that she has no way to break stuff that's higher than 5, so she can't break Leviathan, and Lightning just has a really tough time dealing with Leviathan and 6 CP plus 4 in general, Tenzin especially, and I don't think it would have been overpowered for her to at least say 6 rather than 5 on the 2 crystal thing, and I wish there was something that could overwrite the cost in general and just say she can break anything. Like, even if there was like a support backup of some kind that said Lady Lilith can break anything with her action ability, or can give haste to 2 forwards per turn, something like that. Just right now she feels like very much a diamond in the rough that is the entire lightning element, in my opinion.
Nice. All right, that'll take us away from lightning to water. I gotta mention the Satomo summon really quickly because I don't know, it was just like one-sided Famfrit. Well, that could be good, right? It turns out it's actually pretty good, especially in a deck like Mill where you'll have these crystals that maybe you're not even using anything for, so to cast it for 1 CP. So not a whole lot to say. It's like, yeah, one-sided Famfrit ends up being pretty nice.
Yeah, good card in general. Interesting card in the meta. It's been my preference in Sky Pirates over Alexander because it's always 1 CP less, ignoring, there's no crystal to reduce it, but just being 3 CP is solid. But it doesn't work very well against like Avalanche, which is one of Sky Pirates' weak Cyclops because it doesn't really ever get to kill Barrett. So it's this nice, in that deck in particular, it's nice kind of trying to figure out what's the best trade-off between the discount and the lack of being able to choose your target. But yeah, it's very, very good, especially for a common.
Perfect. All right, and then we have Ultros, who sadly, despite me trying an Ice Water Ultros deck and a Water Fire Ultros deck, the concept just doesn't really work. So really the best place this guy found a home in was Bart's Boko. Was a great Bart's Boko target, particularly because it just straight out removed anything from the game. So fun little one cost for that.
Yeah, could have come out when Bart's Boko came out and maybe would have made that deck super tier 1 back then. But right now it's probably one set too late, but still fun card.
Yeah. All right, and then Pinello. So this will be probably our last Sky Pirate mention, and this card is, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this card. Maybe love's too strong a word. I do like the design of this card in the sense that I like that it rewards you for playing Sky Pirates, and I think that's what the tribal should do. I like, play a bunch of monks, here's your payoff. Play a bunch of pirates, here's your payoff. And I like that. I think, again, is it Pinello? She's clearly strong. Is it Pinello herself? Is it that the support around her is so clean? So I think the neutral effect of getting to draw a card, not again on your turn and their turn, not limited to just yours for some reason, is incredibly strong. You can then protect another pirate from getting chosen by something. You can reduce something by 3,000. And again, she can be pulled right out of the deck by Vaughn. She can be recovered by Balthier. It was pretty easy to get mass pirates that you're then just like, I'll never forget one pirate game where someone basically had no cards in hand, but they had Bismarck and Pinello on the field. So like, all right, draw a card, bounce one back to my hand, Bismarck draw, on your turn, draw. And then, they start their turn with like 6 cards. And I'm just like, holy cow, you had nothing in hand. Like, how did you just restock like that? So this card kind of drove me insane. And again, I think it's a good idea, but I think it's too pushed, whether it's the card itself or the environment that supports it.
Yeah, Pirates right now, it's very much everything comes together to create something magnificent and very strong, but it's also fragile in the sense that, Sky Pirate could easily fall off next set if the ways to deal with the cards that exist currently come around. Like, the reason Pinello is so good is because there aren't that many cards that deal with her efficiently. Like, you play against like Lightning, for example, which you won't do a whole lot of this set, and they're playing the Thunder Drake thing, for example. Like, Pinello's kind of like, you have to find a different way to win. But right now, not many things deal with Pinello, so Pinello is the kind of win condition you work towards. Like you say, they draw 4 cards a turn. That's a win condition. Yeah. So Kites is like a really good card, and it makes the whole rest of the deck more consistent, better. But Pinello is actually the thing you're working towards. You're setting up all these backups for. So it makes perfect sense as a card. It's just right now the deck is just a point too strong. It's an 11 out of 10 kind of thing. Instead, it breaks the limit a little bit too much. But that could easily change very soon.
Those damn 11s. All right. Next, we've got Mindflayer. I just hate these kind of cards. This and Lonnie, and we saw the new Zidane. Like, they're just so high-rolly. I've seen Mindflayer steal an opponent's Leviathan and then cast it for free, which is just bonkers. And then you'll see it steal something just silly, and it doesn't do anything. The one thing I will say, it's interesting that this was able to bring back a version of the mill list. I know some people kind of went back and forth on whether they thought that list was actually good. I know Steve D won a big tournament over in Europe with that mill list, so that was cool to see. But yeah, like, these kind of cards I just hate, because again, it's just a dice roll. It's like, hey, what are you gonna get? And yeah, what do you think of Mindflayer?
Yeah, Mill was never my problem with it. I always knew the Mill deck was bad because Sky Pirate existed. It just so happened when that Mill deck won, no one knew what they were doing, so there wasn't enough Sky Pirates in the room. But yeah, as far as the card goes, yeah, I hate it. I really don't. There's just a noticeable strength in anything that attacks the secret zones of a player. If you're hitting the break zone and the field, your opponents put it there, deliberately or not, but mostly deliberately. So it's something you can interact with, and it's fair because they've let you do it. But you start attacking their hand with 3 CPs Zidane, you start attacking their deck with Lanny and Mindflayer. Sometimes you just high roll and hit the perfect thing that's completely out of their control. Yeah. And it's just like, yeah, is that fun? Yeah, maybe it is for the person playing it, but at least if I was the one playing it, I don't actually think that's fun because either it hits something average or it hits something stupid, and there's generally not a middle ground. So someone always feels bad, and it's just a bit lame.
I was playing the mill deck after Matiski had made it. I was trying it out against my friend. He was playing with the new Shiva, the Opus 15 Shiva we got. He's playing this Ice Shiva deck. And I kid you not, 3 times I pulled his 7 CP Sephiroth. It was just like, huh, now you got to discard too. And again, it was just silly. And in general, not even just this game, there's video games that have characters that steal characters' abilities. And you have made a choice as a deck builder. I'm going to put these mono ice cards in here. And so like you should then get the rewards of the cards you chose. I shouldn't just get your benefits for nothing. Like, yeah, I just don't like this type of design. All right. And water, probably maybe not everyone's favorite crystal user. Maybe that was Robel. I guess we'd have to do a poll. But Lena, she was certainly the one people were very excited about in water. And I actually really underrated this card when I first saw it, mainly because I didn't really know how crystals were going to work, and so it was kind of hard for me to visualize. But seeing it in practice is just like, wow, you can actually do a lot with this. And again, maybe I was just thinking of Warriors of Light when I first saw it. I kind of thought, well, she's limited to work. No, she's not. She can pull back any 2 cost, any 3 costs. Like, this was one that I definitely changed my opinion on after not only playing with it myself, but seeing it as like, wow, okay, I can see why people were hyped on this card. What do you think of Lena?
Yeah, I really liked her. I mean, I was a bit unsure because she's so similar to the Opus 3 variant that's been so strong for so long now. But, you know, if you're not playing crystals, then you play that one. If you are playing crystals, then you might play this one. You might play both, because Arise is also a very strong S ability on the Opus 3 version. But yeah, I really liked it. As you said, it can bring back anything. So I was using it in like Water Lightning, Water Fire to bring back Noctis, which is really cool. There's very few cards that get back light or dark cards, and usually when they do, they're like kind of expensive. But Lena treats Noctis like any other card, and yeah, just a really fun card to play with. I really like the way just a general FF thing about how it's 2 separate autos. So if you have 2 crystals, you pay 1, you bring out your Gal gives you a second one, interrupting the stack, then you pay 2 to bring out a 3-drop. And I just thought that was a really nice thing that it did. They didn't have to do, but it's cool. It creates a board out of nothing.
Yeah, it was nice the way the ability works, paying on resolution, that, yeah, you could actually, on the stack, generate enough crystals for yourself to use it. That was really nice. And speaking of Noctis, onto our light card, did he single-handedly bring back party attacks? I don't know about that, but he was fun. Great addition to Bart's Boko. People used it in Avalanche a lot. Again, another one of those cards that I tend to like this design because, you know, unless they've already built their board up so that they can party and immediately give him haste, he does take a moment to give you a reward, but kind of like we've said a few times in this video is that, you know, I felt like you earned the reward of playing into Noctis and building your deck around it and doing stuff that he could do. Incredibly versatile card. I don't think you ever have a bad ability to pick from with Noctis just because he's got so many to choose from, so really ended up liking this guy.
Yeah, a nice, solid, balanced, well-designed card. Like, I like the fact that you can play it on an empty board, especially in a deck that has like haste options, like playing like the Fire Sage or Belias, and they're like, oh, he's got Noctis out, you know, what's going to happen next turn? Whereas obviously if they've already got Layla Viking out, for example, then you're like, oh, I might have Noctis. You know, it creates all these mind games, whether you play him first, whether you don't play him at all. That creates a new dimension for any kind of party attack decks that was very necessary. It's like good that they finally have a light card or dark card that supports in the way that, you know, makes it actually scary, because, you know, party attack decks haven't historically been scary as far as they're going to kill you, but they draw a lot of cards with stuff like Yuna and get out cards with Bart's Boko. But Noctis is like, now this is how you die.
Yeah. Great. And speaking of scary, nothing scarier than his villain, Arden, the Dark Legend himself. Man, I'll never forget the kind of wave I think everyone went through when this card got revealed. They're like, this card's insane. Holy cow. Wait a minute. Is it actually that good? No, wait a minute. I don't think this card's good at all. And so you've got some experience. I know you at least won a game with Arden. I can honestly say every game I played Arden, I lost. And that feels so bad, and I like him so much from 15. He's such a great character, but his card just blows. Like, it just blows. Like, there's multiple instances to hit Amaterasu, and just discarding your hand is such a penalty. And then any card that lets your opponent choose the least damaging option for themselves, like, of course, that's never really it's never seen the light of day because, yeah, they'll just do whatever is the least damaging option. And then, oh, by the way, you now have no hands, so I have a green light to do whatever I want against you. And here we go. Like, yeah, just, what a letdown.
Yeah, it is a good card, and it is worth building around if it couldn't be Amaterasu. Like, if I don't understand, because it was like I was saying with Neo X-Death versus Orphan earlier. Like, the dark card is always better than the actual, the normal version you can discard for CP. Arden's dark. Why can it be Amaterasu? Like, why can you discard 5 and they can Amaterasu the whole thing? It just doesn't make any sense at all. If they could Amaterasu 1 trigger, fine. If they could Amaterasu just so you don't discard your hand, fine. But they could just negate the entire effect. You lose your hand, you lose the game. It's not that good. But it could have been. It could have been like a meta card. It could have been something people would consider if there wasn't this one fire summon that every single fire deck plays 3 of around to just ruin its day.
You wrote a great article about kind of using water cards to basically replenish your hand to kind of help mitigate the downside. And I think maybe you played with it a little more than I did. White Mage said something about it too that kind of stuck with me, is that he doesn't even like the design because he feels like either you win on the spot or you lose on the spot. He's like, so how is that interesting when this just says, okay, well, now I either immediately lose or immediately win? Like, I don't know.
Well, it's an alternate win condition. You could say the same thing about Mill, right? Like, Mill is not about dealing 7 damage. You're playing a completely different game of cards to your opponent, but you're playing in the same trading card game. When you're playing Arden, it has the benefit of you can win by dealing 7 damage normally, but it's also like some games you think, okay, I'm going to pivot, I'm going to be all in on Arden here, and it's really interesting puzzling it all together and figuring out, can you win? And if you can win, how many points of damage you have to chip in, how many cards in hand do you have to reserve for Arden. It's a card that, aside from the Amaterasu thing, it's kind of awkward because it requires so much thought and effort, and with nothing really to play for at the moment, I don't think anyone wants to think too hard about cards like Arden, aside from the fact that he isn't good enough.
Interesting. Well, maybe one day something will happen to bring him in, because it sounds like you're definitely higher on him than I am, so maybe something will bring him into the light one day.
Hopefully.
We will see. All right, rounding up, going to just talk about the starters really quick. Avalanche definitely proved its mettle. I remember when I first read these cards, I thought they all sounded really broken, and then playing them and actually getting to play them, I think they're very strong. I don't think they're quite as strong as I thought they were, and part of that's because I misread Wedge here. I thought he did 4 or less. He actually does 4 or more on his break effect, but these cards really let the Barret and the Tifa shine from Opus 14. I'm guessing Barret is kind of the glue, is what makes it so good, is that not only does he give them all haste, the fact that you basically can't ever not have the Avalanche characters because Barret can always just swap into them. Like, I think that action ability is incredibly strong. But yeah, we've seen this deck be very competitive. Really was surprised by how much it's really just kind of stood its own test of time for this Opus.
Yeah, I mean, it's the last thing we're covering, so I don't mind going on about it a little bit.
Sure.
Because I feel like it's important to talk about Avalanche, because as much as you say it's been competitive, I fully agree with you, but I've heard of a lot of people underrating it. I've seen a lot of people underrate it, and I really think it's like, not only is it a really good deck, it's like a really necessary deck. It's the perfect aggro deck, I think. It has late game potential. It has because of the way Barret cycles the stuff back, like you said, it always has a chance. Yeah. Like, even if you get Shantoto, Titaned, Borklid, whatever, all you need is a Barret and one other Avalanche operative, then you play the Barret, play the Avalanche operative, discard whatever to get another one back, and suddenly your board's back again. And if they've already taken like 5 damage at that point, then they might be dead, or your Wedge might be able to break their old Bismarck, and all of a sudden you're back in the game. It feels like, with the amount of EX bursts it has as well, with Tyro and potentially damaging summons like Ifrit 5 and Titan 5 if they play that kind of stuff, it's such an interesting deck to play against. I've played against it a lot this set as Sky Pirates, and it's really the only thing that stops Sky Pirates, I think, from being like running away with the entire format, because I think it's the only deck that can beat it like with a reasonable amount of consistency. I just think it's that awkward thing again where not a lot of people are playing, not a lot of people are being able to optimize the deck, and Samurais is so much easier. So people think, oh, Samurais has a much better chance because you've got your easy 50 fire cards, your 3 Amaterasus. Most of the time that will deal with Sky Pirates, but actually a really well-built and well-played Avalanche deck has a really decent chance versus Sky Pirates. I just don't think anyone's really been in that position to know. And that's kind of one of the things that could have made this meta so interesting, that it's a really kind of perfect triangle between Samurais, Sky Pirates, and Avalanche that would have made the format really interesting if we got to see more of it.
Really good point there that, most aggro decks, usually they go all in, and then if they hit the Shantoto or the Susano or whatever, and then they kind of just lose because, well, that's everything they had. But like you said, Avalanche can always come back because they just need that Barret, and then they can start pulling back the other cards they need. And in particular, I think, like, Biggs is such a good card for this deck because not only does it draw, so again, it helps mitigate those turns where you're basically going all in, you're throwing your whole hand out there. Biggs is going to get you card backs. But then the fact that he makes it so the 2 forwards can't be broken, like, you don't really want to block that because you're just going to lose a forward for... You can't really trade into them then, like, through combat. So, yeah, a lot of really kind of small key points that really helps boost Avalanche. So, great insight there, Alex. So now on the evil side of that is the Shinra Turks. And I was really thinking, so why does Avalanche so good and Turks just seem so lackluster? Is it the Rufus versus the Barret? Is it the color elements? What if the Turks had the exact same effects and they were in Earth and Fire? So they have access to Amaterasu, to Tyro, to Shantoto, to all those kind of staple, really good Earth Fire cards. Would that alone make them much better? Is it just the Ice Lightning? Are they just missing something else? They don't have enough names. I can say I've built a Turks deck with, I think, 11 total names, or 13. I had an extra Rito and Rude in there, and I've whiffed on Tenzin plenty of times where he'll just reveal nothing. So, yeah, I don't know. How do you feel about Turks?
Yeah, like I agree. It's a good comparison that Earth and Fire are good elements. When you combine the 2 good elements with synergy and have all those good cards splashed in, like Amaterasu, Mist Dragon, Q-Sith, etc., it makes it a great deck. And then you got Ice and Lightning, which are the 2 worst elements in the game. So you're giving the archetype is also not as good as Avalanche because the synergy is not as good. So it's almost like what we were saying with Rebels earlier, how, Fire Wind isn't that good and Rebels aren't very good. Ice Lightning is better, and the Turks, I think, are better, but still not good enough. So I actually agree, yeah, if they were both Earth and Fire, then there would probably be a strong Turks deck, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I've gotten to resolve the Rufus damage 5 ability a few times. It feels amazing when it goes off, and it kind of has that zero miss quality to it too. That if you assemble all the Turks, it's like, okay, well, it's just game over because I'm going to dull your whole board, I'm going to rush it, I'm going to kill you. But similar to Arden, there's so many chances to stop that. First of all, it's expensive. It's 10 CP total to get Rufus and pay the effect. Then they can Amaterasu it. They can Mist Dragon your break zone. Whereas the Barret, you can Mist Dragon the break zone, but he's only swapping 1 card. Whereas Rufus, you're just throwing all your hopes and dreams into that. So, and unlike the Barret, if the Rufus comes out early, he's just a body. He doesn't do anything. Whereas the Barret has that continuous swap value. So, but I was thinking about that today. I was like, man, if these were just in different elements and had all the same effects, how much different would it be? All right, and I believe that is everything we have for Opus 15. So, Alex, kind of final thoughts from you about the Opus as a whole, things you like, didn't like, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I stand by my initial thoughts. This format was actually excellent. The Opus is great. I just didn't get much chance to play. I don't think many people got much chance to play. A lot of there's a few regionals that are happening in Europe of this set, but most of the ones that seem to be happening in at least the UK and North America aren't going to be happening until next set. So hopefully next set's as good or better, because I am eager to get back to competitive play. Like my drive to play dropped off the map this set because there's nothing to grind for. But if there's something to grind for next set, then I'm sure I'll be back on the wagon, trying to going to events and trying to do well, hopefully. But yeah, great set. Just still the omnipresent COVID, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Putting a damper in the works.
My locals are basically dead right now, and I do wonder, wow, if they actually announced events, I know a few people for sure would come back, would say, oh, okay, I guess I'll start showing up at the shop, start playing again. But a lot of people do feel that way. It's like, well, there's nothing really to play for. Like, what do I want to play for in general? So, yeah, I feel yeah. This set was kind of interesting in that I think it did suffer. It's weird to say this maybe, but it suffered from the last set being so strong, is that I think this set was overall better balanced, and I like that. But because Opus 14 was so ridiculous with the primals, with Stern Leonis, that this one seems quote-unquote weak by comparison, even though I think this is more like the power level they should be trying to push stuff and not, the craziness that 14 was.
Yeah, the bans gave us a nice kind of extra breath of life into it. Like, we're thinking, okay, we'll see how the first month goes, and if it's bad, no one's going to play because Stern.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, Stern's going to get banned though. So you see what this first month's like. Yeah, it sucks. But Stern's gone now, so things are a lot better. And then we're thinking, oh, what we've got to look forward to is Square Enix going to announce some events and things like that. And yeah, there are a few things being announced, but as far as I can tell, that there's still not been much more than a nationals in each region this year. I think even now, even at the end of March, it's possibly too late to have announced anything on a more global scale, like a Worlds, by the end of this year.
Yeah.
So,
well, fingers crossed. I can always hope. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today. I had a great time. Always enjoy talking to you. Folks, if you have any questions or comments, let me know what you thought of the Opus. Were there any cards we didn't mention that either lived up to your expectations or surpassed them, or your thought, wow, this card is going to be great, and then, this card actually kind of sucks? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, I appreciate having you here. Alex, thanks for joining me, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.
thanks a lot. Stay cool, everybody.